Hi there, and welcome to my presentation on how to be cost-effective with your wedding flowers. So often when I have a wedding consultation, budget comes up almost all the time. And sometimes you get a shocked bride like this saying, "It's going to cost how much?" So there are actually ways to have some idea about how that cost is going to be ahead of time. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So this idea of how to combine your budget with your beauty is a very important one. And remember, knowledge is power. And put yourself in a position of power so that you are more well-informed and able to make some decisions as you're heading into that wedding consultation or maybe right after you have that. So I'd like to introduce to you 5 strategies on how you can start getting yourself more knowledgeable and more cost-effective. And we're going to talk about each of these in specifics, and also I have a lot of pictures to illustrate to you what I mean. So one of the strategies is learning about the types of flowers that there are. A second strategy is using your personal flowers versus your ceremony and reception flowers in different ways so that there is actually a different cost to them. The third strategy is multiple uses. Fourth strategy is picking your venues. And the fifth one is renting versus owning some of your containers, your vases, your candle holders, and all the things that you may need for your wedding. But first, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Ingrid Surratt. I'm the owner of Bloom & Floral Design. And I'm not going to read to you all of this, but I'll give you a minute to look at it. As you can see, I've been doing floral design for a long time. And I love flowers. I love floral design. And I pride myself on working with you as my client to really match your budget. Now, if you're lucky enough that you don't have to really have a budget and you can afford to do whatever you want to do, good for you and good for me. But most of us these days have budget restrictions. And this is very true of a lot of the young couples who are getting married these days. So the first strategy that is very effective is to know your flowers. There are different types of flowers. There are what I call high-end flowers, and then there are less expensive. So some of the high-end flowers are listed here, such as your roses, hydrangea, peonies, mini callas, and all the flowers that you see listed here. Lily of the Valley is a lovely flower, but they are one of the most expensive flowers. Also, all of one kind bouquets and arrangements. If you have all roses, and I'll show you in a minute what I mean by that, it's going to be more expensive than a mixed bouquet that just has some roses in it. So here's some examples of high-end flowers. As you see in the upper left-hand corner, that bouquet is all peonies. And peonies are an expensive flower. Same with roses, especially the Ecuadorian and Colombian roses, which are, of course, imported, and they have much bigger heads. They're more dramatic. And so a bouquet just made of roses is going to be more expensive. Now, the cascading bouquets, generally, when they're mixed like I was talking about, they can be less expensive, but this happens to be a mixture of very high-end flowers. You've got roses, you've got calla lily, mini calla lilies, not the big ones. The mini callas are more expensive, and hydrangea is expensive also. So this is more of a high-end bouquet. And then in the bottom row, I have kind of selected some flowers that are expensive flowers. As I mentioned, the lilies of the valley is an expensive flower. And also your cymbidium orchids and orchids in general. There are a few, such as the dendrobium orchids, that are less expensive. But the Cymbidium orchids are an expensive orchid, and you have labor costs on top of that because they have to be wired into the bouquet, since, as you can see, they have a very short stalk for each blossom. The same is true of the gardenia. They are a very short stalk. They're a beautiful flower, but they also have the labor cost as well as the cost of the flower attached to them. So let's move on to the less expensive flowers. You can have a beautiful bouquet with less expensive flowers in them. And some of them are listed here: the dahlias, lisianthus, scabiosas, calla lilies. Now these are the big ones, not the mini callas. Tulips, ranunculus, and I've named a few more. And then again, the mixed bouquets and arrangements are more cost effective than if you pick something that is all of one kind of flower. So here's some pictures. One of my favorite bouquets to do is this mixed bouquet of dahlias and succulents. It's a beautiful bouquet. Dahlias are inexpensive, succulents are inexpensive, and they make a beautiful mix. And then in the middle upper row is a bouquets of field flowers. This was for a ranch wedding. She really wanted a theme of field flowers and wildflowers. So these bouquets reflect that theme and are quite inexpensive. And then in your upper right-hand corner is the bouquet of spring flowers, and she wanted to have feathers in her bouquet, so the bottom of the bouquet is framed with feathers. But these spring flowers are all inexpensive flowers. It has a beautiful full look, and she was being very cost effective by doing that. Then in the lower left-hand corner is a mixed bouquet with roses. So this kind of illustrates what I was talking about before. Then instead of having a bouquet with all roses, you just have some woven in with other inexpensive flowers. And she wanted a little bit of a cascading look, which is why we put the fern fronds in there. Then I have just two pictures that I'm showing you as an inexpensive flower. One is the tulips, and they come in a gazillion different colors. And lisianthus is a great alternative to roses. The range of color is not as great as it is for roses, but they really make quite a statement if you are into the colors that lisianthus comes in, which is basically the pinks, lavenders, purple, and some white. So as you can see, there are really great alternatives to the more expensive flowers and the less expensive flowers. I hesitate to give a range really for these because you really have to consult your floral designer. But if I were to put some kind of range to the high-end flowers, I would say anywhere between 150 to 250 for your bridal bouquets. And then your bridesmaids bouquets are generally smaller, and so they will be somewhat less. And then for these less expensive flower bouquets, I would put a range of maybe 100 to 175. But again, it's something that you really need to ask your floral designer about. We are all different and we all have different prices. So let's move on to the second strategy for combining your budget with your beauty. So where would you like to spend your money? I always recommend to my prospective brides to spend the money on your personal flowers. And these are the personal flowers: your bouquets, the corsages, the boutonnieres, flower girl enhancements, hair pieces, and special floral accessories. Why? Because these are the things that are going to be in your pictures, in your bridal pictures, much more than your ceremony and reception flowers. So what do I mean by that? Well, here are some examples. These are pictures of all of the personal flowers, and they are going to be the ones that the professional photographer is really going to be taking pictures of. So as you see in the upper left-hand corner, this is a picture of the family around the bride. And it pretty much pictures all the elements that I was talking about: the corsages, the boutonnieres, the bouquets. The flower girl's carrying a little basket. She's got on a head wreath. And then in the upper right-hand corner is a boutonniere. And let me just insert here that I have pretty much a set price for boutonnieres and corsages, and I think most floral designers do. But again, the mini calla is a high-end flower, and so this boutonniere is generally a little bit more than the set price that I have. In the lower left-hand corner is a very cute little flower girl who is holding a bridal bouquet and then her own bouquet, but she's going to be in the pictures. And then there are hair treatments that are also going to be an important part of the picture. And then there's two bouquets pictured here: a stem wrap bouquet and a cascading bouquet. So that flower design really does make a difference too. And I just wanted to take a minute to tell you about that as well. So you do concentrate on your personals in terms of price if you have budget restrictions, but also how you deal with those personal flowers is going to make a difference. So as I just mentioned, there are two kinds of bouquets generally for bridal bouquets. There's either a stem wrap or there's a cascading. And the cascading tends to be a little bit more because it involves a holder, it involves more what we call mechanics, and sometimes has more flowers than a stem wrap does. And the type of ribbon and treatment is also going to influence the price of your bouquet. Corsages and boutonnieres, as I mentioned before, most floral designers do have set prices, but if there are going to be some enhancements, they're going to be more. Flower girl baskets, pomanders, which is like a flower ball, flower petals, head wreaths, all of those things are considered the personal flowers, but they really can vary in price. And here's an illustration of that. So the upper left-hand corner is a pomander or a flower girl ball, and then you have a flower basket, which generally has either flower petals in it or has some flowers in it. It again depends on what it is that you would like. Then the next picture has some flower girls who have a bouquet and a basket and head wreaths. And then there's a few pictures of corsages, and then some pictures of boutonnieres. And again, that you see that mini calla boutonniere is going to be more than the one next to it, which is just a succulent, and those cute little yellow balls are called Cresspedia and is a fairly inexpensive flower. And next to that, the dahlia and the succulent is a fairly inexpensive flower. So your ceremony and reception flowers kind of come in these categories. If you're having a ceremony outdoors, maybe you're going to have a trellis or a hoopah. There are such things as aisle enhancements. There are things like chair or pew treatments and pedestal arrangements in the church, in the room where you're having a ceremony, outside, entrance pieces, draping of things like the trellis and the hoopah, rose petals, any miscellaneous things that you want to add. And then, of course, there's the centerpieces and your table arrangements, depending on the different kinds of tables that you're having. And then there's the cake. So again, if you're lucky enough not to have to be very concerned about your personals and your ceremony and reception flowers, that's great. But if you do have budget restrictions, again, concentrate on the personals and go a little less expensive for these ceremony and reception flowers. So here I actually have some examples of kind of high-end treatments and less expensive treatments. So the trellises that you see in the upper left-hand corner in the middle are different in price. The one on the upper left-hand corner is really just an archway, and it doesn't have a whole lot of flowers in it. It actually has 3 bunches of flowers and a lot of greens, a lot of vines and other greenery going around it. On the other hand, the trellis in the middle has 4 posts and a very, very heavy treatment of roses. I don't know how many roses are in this thing, but a lot. And so that's going to be a lot more expensive than just the archway trellis. And then below it are 2 different treatments for hoopas. As you can see, the one on the lower left-hand corner is very simply treated with just something at the top of the 4 posts, a shawl and some beautiful draping. It looked very nice. It was a garden wedding. And then you have a hoopah that is a whole lot more advanced in terms of it has complete decorations on all the posts. They're mostly roses, and you've got some pretty hefty birch branches as well. So that one is going to be a whole lot more expensive than the one to the left of it. And then I have 2 aisle treatments to illustrate to you. The one on the upper right-hand corner is all roses, pretty solidly done all the way down the row of chairs. And actually, it's more like pews, but it was an outdoor wedding, interestingly enough. And then below it was this ranch wedding that I had mentioned before, where she just wanted to do field flowers and a very wildflower-like look. These are just pails with baby's breath in them. And they, therefore, are going to be a whole lot less expensive than the aisle enhancement with all the roses in it. So here we see centerpieces and cakes. The centerpiece in the upper left-hand corner, as opposed to the one in the the lower right-hand corner, the one above it is much more expensive, and I actually, for something like this, charge by the foot because there's so much going on. The ranch wedding that I was talking about, that I'm actually illustrating it a lot, she wanted a really kind of field flower garden look. So we just took clay pots and lined the tables with the clay pots and used very inexpensive field flowers. So those centerpieces are going to be a whole lot less. Same with the ones in the middle here. The one up above, as you can see, has a lot of roses in it. So it's going to be much more expensive than the one below it, which was a garden wedding. She wanted a very informal look. So we just did baskets filled with mostly dahlias and Gerber daisies and stock, all inexpensive flowers. Cake treatments can also make a huge difference in terms of price. They both look beautiful, but they are really different in price because the one above in the upper right-hand corner is done mostly with roses and rose petals. The one underneath is done with dahlias and succulents, which are much less expensive. Both are beautiful. Actually, all these centerpieces are really beautiful, and that's my point with these things, that there are alternatives. You can still have something beautiful and meet your budget. Okay, let's go on to the third strategy, which is multiple uses. And what do I mean by that? I mean that arrangements used in the ceremony can be transferred to the reception. And actually, I'll show you also, you can even use some of your personals for your reception. So things like pedestal arrangements, aisle enhancements, your chair or pew decorations, your spray arrangements, those are all things that maybe you're using in your ceremony and you can use again in your reception. So here's some examples of that. So this was a church wedding in the upper left-hand corner, and there were several of these really beautiful, dramatic pedestal arrangements. We were able to take them after the ceremony and bring them to the reception. It was at a beautiful estate, and we were able to put them around in the reception in different tables and in different places. So they really served a dual purpose. Same for these sprays. The sprays, same church wedding, were on the pews and on the railings in the front of the church, and we were able to take them down once the ceremony was finished, and we put them on the gate, on the tent poles, and in various other places at the reception. So they also were able to be used for multiple purposes. Then here again in the lower left-hand corner, you see that wedding where we had the buckets with the Queen Anne's, not the Queen Anne's lace, excuse me, the baby's breath. And the baby's breath buckets are very easy to move from the ceremony to the reception. And that's what we did. In the middle on the lower row here were chair enhancements, and those were part of the ceremony. They were done like in every other row, I think, and we were able to take those off and bring them to the reception, and then they were placed on the bride's chairs, the bridal party chairs, and special guests, and it looked beautiful. And again, all of these things were able to be used for dual purposes. And I mentioned that sometimes your personals can actually be used as well for the reception. One of the things that I do is if there is a head table where the bridal party is going to be sitting, I put glass vases at the head of the tables. And when the party comes in, they can put their bouquets in these glass vases, of course with water in them, and they have instant centerpieces. So they don't have to worry about centerpieces for their head table. So it works out really well that way. Fourth strategy is your venue. So where you're going to have your ceremony and your reception can make a huge difference. Of course in price, but also in the kinds of flowers that you need or how many flowers you're going to need. Churches these days have a lot of restrictions about flower petals, for instance, rose petals. They don't really want you to use real ones anymore going down the aisles. They're also very careful about the pews and the treatment that you use for those, and even some pedestal arrangements. Same with hotel and inns. They have several restrictions that you need to know about too, so that you know what kinds of flowers to get. A garden is going to have a lot of flowers around already, so maybe you don't need that many flowers. And I find in the beach weddings that I do that usually the draping or the archway that they use as the focal point for their altar doesn't need a whole lot of flower treatment. There may be some petals on the sand and maybe some treatments on the chairs, but for the most part, the beach does not need a whole lot of flowers. And actually, it's really windy sometimes, and that can really wreak havoc on your floral arrangements there. Winery is another really great place to have a wedding, but they also have restrictions, and it's good to know about those ahead of time, because you can either put lots of flowers in, or maybe that's just not necessary, and wineries are a beautiful place usually, and you don't need as many flowers there. Private residence, if it's in a garden or in a beautiful part of the home, maybe you don't need as many flowers for that either. And in Santa Barbara, California, where I live, there are some very popular sites for weddings, and same thing, sometimes the environment really does not require a whole lot of flowers. So here's some examples of what I mean. Again, this church wedding that I was featuring in some photos before, the upper left-hand corner shows you the entrance, and we did a spray up above that, which we also took down actually and brought to the reception. The one in the middle here on the upper row was that garden wedding that I was talking about with the baskets. And it was in a beautiful setting, so she really didn't need a whole lot of additional flowers. Same for the upper right-hand corner. We did a very simple trellis because it was actually in a beautiful garden where there were a lot of flowers behind me. I'm taking this picture, but behind me there were beautiful flowers, so they really didn't need a whole lot. Lower left-hand corner is the beach wedding, and as I was talking about before, all they did was have some poles with some beautiful drapings. The flowers were basically featured in the bridal party itself, and flower petals, rose petals I believe they were, in the sand, and then they had the reception elsewhere. That ranch wedding that I have featured in a few of my photos is pictured here in the lower, lower row in the middle picture. And same thing, that was a beautiful, beautiful setting, so she didn't need a whole lot of flowers to enhance that. And then one of the popular sites that I was talking about is the Santa Barbara Museum of History. They have a beautiful outdoor venue, lots of beautiful flowers and gardens around. So again, you don't need a whole lot other than your own personal flowers for that. And the fifth strategy, which is also very cost effective, is renting versus buying. So when I give estimates for my centerpieces, for instance, I often have to put in the cost of my containers. And that increases, of course, the price of your centerpiece. So there are ways to get centerpiece containers that you can rent, and then I usually put in something that fits into the container that is being rented so that the bride can use the flowers for her guests or for herself, or when we do breakdown, we can get rid of the flowers too and return the containers. Same thing with vases and pedestals and special structures like trellis or hoopah, and candle holders too. When I showed you the photo of that really long set of centerpiece with the branches and everything, there were candelabras kind of tucked in between, and those can easily be rented. It's a beautiful look at night when you can put candles in those with that kind of a centerpiece with a long row of beautiful branches and flowers and everything. So it is really a wonderful way to save some money by doing that renting. And then when we do breakdown, we can either save the flowers for you or we can get rid of the flowers, but we can return the containers to to ourselves or to the place that you're renting it from. And also some floral designers have their own containers that they will rent out to you, or they sometimes have a relationship with an organization, a party rental company, that they can do the renting with you through that. So hopefully you have had some alternatives to think about in terms of combining your budget and your beauty. It really is a winning combination. And as you can see, this bride is pretty happy that she's been able to find that winning combination and have a beautiful wedding and still meet her budget needs, which I, again, pride myself in being able to do. So I would love for you to get in touch with me. Here is my contact information, both my website. Please come and check it out at www.blumenfloraldesign.com, or you can email me. And I would love to hear from you if you have any questions about this presentation or any concerns, ideas, or if you have an upcoming wedding and you would like to contact me, I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your attention.